This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and today we're going to work on this Westinghouse solid-state 4-speed record player from 1967 that I got off of the Goodwill auction site. But before we get into repairing this, let me give you a word of warning about the Goodwill auction site. I know many of you use it to buy various things. I've used it a good bit over the years and gotten some pretty good deals there. Although here lately the deals are starting to get few and far between, and I'm starting to suspect them of shill bidding. I have no way of proving it, I just have suspicion, and let me tell you about my last two experiences there and see what you think about it. This Westinghouse record player, yeah, I'll admit I did something stupid and I bid more on it than I should have. And 1 second before the auction ended, the bid miraculously jumped up to the next increment below my maximum bid. So let me give you an example. Let's say that I bid $50.50 on this, not saying that's what I bid, just using that for an example. And their bidding system is supposed to be a proxy bidding system just like eBay. You know, I can bid my maximum bid of $57.50, but if the one under me's maximum bid is only $25, then I'll get it for $25.50 or $26 or $26.50, whatever the minimum increment is. So I'm sitting here watching this thing. We'll just use $57.50 for our bid, just for the sake of argument. And I kid you not, at the last second, a $50 bid mysteriously pops up and runs my bid up to my maximum bid amount. I even looked at the bid history after it was over with, and that final bid was entered in literally 1 freaking second before the auction ended. And a couple of weeks ago, I bought another record player on there, and the exact same thing happened. So my theory is, they've got software that, of course, knows what your maximum bid is. So at the very end, 1 or 2 seconds before the end of the auction, it enters in their own shill bid to run the bid up to what your maximum is. So, you know, you're going to pay the maximum amount for what you bid on. Now, if somebody bids it up to that amount, then that's one thing, a legit sale. But if you got some software program doing the bidding for you just to run the bid up just so your CEO can get more money, then that's not a good thing, and it makes me want to just say bye-bye to shopgoodwill.com, because I don't play games that way. But I can tell you this, anything I bid on there in the future, I'm going to be real careful about my bid amount. You know, I'm not going to carelessly enter in a higher bid than I should just to get the thing. But I don't go along with that crap. I've read some stories online about how they got kicked off of eBay pretty much for shill bidding, and that's when they set up their own auction site. So pretty much there's no rules because it's all their ball game, and they can pretty much do what they want to. Although I'm sure that would make a heck of a story for Dateline or 2020 if somebody could prove that Goodwill was actually doing that on their auction site. Alright, enough of that. Just threw that out there just as a word of warning. Fortunately, this record player seems to be in pretty good shape. I'm thankful the 3-volt cartridge appears to be good. The needle was bent, but I've got this card of kitty needles that one of my viewers of my YouTube channel so graciously sent to me, and I just used one of them off of the card to put in this record player because the original needle was all bent. The one thing I don't like about this record player and many other similar types of record players that starting in the mid-60s on up is the record player may have 78 RPM speed, but you no longer have a flip-over cartridge. They only give you a 1 mil or 0.7 mil LP size tip, which I don't care for. I think if a machine has 78, then it should have a flip over needle in it, so you can have a 3mm needle for playing 78s. Although by the time this was made, they probably thought that nobody would be playing the old style 10 and 12 inch shellac 78s with wide grooves. They probably figured the only 78s that would be played would be the little small kiddie records from the 1960s, and most of those are micro grooves, so that's probably the reason for this. But I'm not going to worry about this. It is what it is, and we're going to get it overhauled and go from there. Hopefully try to get some of my money back on this thing. You see in the lid there, they didn't even pull the $5 yard sale sticker off of it. Most likely this was in a yard sale, and when it didn't sell, everything that was left over got donated to Goodwill, and something that should have been $5 on the Goodwill site ended up costing me more, partially due to my stupidity and partially due to their shill bidding practices. I can understand that might happen once, a bid come through 1 second before the end of the auction. I know all about sniping, but to have it happen twice and it get run up right up to what your maximum bid is, I don't think that's very coincidental. I think that's some insider shadiness going on. Now let's get this thing apart and have a look at it. Alright, here's the drive mechanism, your typical 4-speed General Industries mechanism with an AC motor. Needs lubrication in the worst kind of way. Here's the amplifier. This is one of the nicer ones on a hand-wire chassis. Uses 2 transistors, the audio output transistor, which uses the chassis for a heat sink, and a driver transistor ahead of that, and the whole thing is operated off of a half-wave rectified voltage coming directly off of the AC power line and through a dropping resistor. These types of amplifiers tend to sound more like a one-tube wonder. Some of the solid-state amplifiers from this time period that had a push-pull output stage were very cheaply and poorly designed and sounding like crap. These actually sound better. Alright, we have our cardboard tube filter capacitor, which surprisingly is in pretty good shape, but it's going to go anyway because I can tell it's getting weak. And I'll spot check everything else with the amp and make sure it's okay, and then we'll clean and lubricate the drive mechanism and motor and replace the grommets, and this thing ought to be good to go. Here's our old cap. The 100 microfarad section is reading 87, so a little weak there, and the 50 is reading 54, so that section is within tolerance. But yeah, this needed to go. It would have only gotten worse over time, so we're in the process of installing a couple of nice, fresh new ones in there. Okay, back on the Westinghouse. I've cleaned and lubricated the drive mechanism and motor and replaced the motor mounting grommets with new ones. Here are the 3 old ones here. One of them is already cracking and crumbling apart, so let's go ahead and change them all out. Relubricated the spindle, all that. Alright, airplane, go bother Shango 066 and leave me alone. Alright, here's the amplifier, which I went ahead and overhauled, and the first thing I did was rearrange the speaker wiring. They simply had these solid, thin wires coming off the secondary of the audio output transformer. And then granted, they had them running through some plastic tubing, but they were running through here and connected directly to the speaker. And one of the wires broke off of the speaker in the course of me servicing it. And I have seen these where the wire would break off right where it enters into the transformer, and I just don't like that arrangement. So we just added a terminal strip here, shortened the wires coming out of the audio output transformer, soldered them to this terminal strip, and then ran some nice flexible wiring from the terminal strip, and the other end, of course, will be connected to the speaker, and that way there's no stress on these wires coming out of the audio output transformer. I replaced the original rectifier diode with one that's much beefier, because a lot of those early silicon rectifier diodes are prone to shorting, and I just decided to play it safe, and as cheap as new diodes are, there's no reason not to. All of the resistors, which most of them were 10%, there were a few 5% ones, were out of tolerance. Not horribly bad, but in solid state stuff, those kind of circuits are a little more picky than tube stuff, so I went ahead and changed all the resistors. This cap here is the emitter bypass cap for the audio output transistor. The original was 100 microfarad. It checked fine for ESR, but when I measured its capacitance value, it read something like 256 microfarad. Now, back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for electrolytics to read as high as 100% higher than their stated value, but 256 is more than 100%. And usually when a capacitor reads that high up on its value, that means that it's leaky, because your capacitance meter measures the time that it takes the capacitor to charge, and uses that information to calculate the microfarad value that it measures on the meter display. Well, when a capacitor is severely leaky, it takes it a lot longer to charge, and that fools the capacitance meter into thinking that the capacitance value is a lot higher than it actually should be. So we went ahead and replaced that. Now, this is a hot chassis amplifier, meaning that one side of the AC line is connected directly to the chassis. But don't worry, there's no shock hazard posed as long as you don't open the thing up and start poking around with the chassis exposed, because they have the chassis mounted to the plastic motor board from the underside, and the volume control shaft is made of plastic, so even if you pull the knob off, you're not going to come in contact with a metal shaft that could nail you. Now, this capacitor here is an isolation capacitor that connects between the negative terminal of the cartridge and the circuit ground, which, like I said, is the chassis. The original was a 0.01 microfarad General Instruments or Industries, whatever brand they are, ceramic case capacitor. I decided, just to be on the safe side, to go ahead and replace it with a modern AC safety capacitor that is designed to not short. If it ever fails, it's supposed to fail open. It's not supposed to fail shorted. Alright, now I think we can put this back in the cabinet, and all I need to do is clean our idler wheel and clean the motor shaft, and we'll put everything back together and hopefully have a good record player. And no, I'm not ashamed to show pictures of my work. If you do it neatly enough, you shouldn't be ashamed, but I've seen some pictures, even some high-priced eBay sellers show under-chassis pictures of what they did, and they should have been ashamed to show those pictures, especially for the price they were charging. And I think anyone who advertises a restored unit who is worth his or her salt should have no problem with showing pictures. If you request to see pictures of the underside and they don't show them or refuse to show them, then that tells you that they're trying to hide something. Alright, here we are with the wheel back in place. Doesn't that sound a lot better than it did before when we spun it? No noisy spin. And I just cleaned the platter. This thing was cruddy. I should have shown you all the dirt and crud that was on this. Now, even though this is a plastic platter, it still has a metal bushing in the center, unlike the plastic platters on modern Crosley record players. And yeah, I even cleaned the little rubber bumpers that protect the record. So yep, this thing's going to look nice when I'm through with it. Alright, here we are back together and cleaned up pretty good.
by Dover Publications, Incorporated. Recorded in 6 records for the Library of Congress in the studios of the American Printing House for the Blind, December 1964. Intended solely for the use of the blind, this book is in the public domain. Read by George Walsh. Notice to listeners, it is important that talking book records be kept free from grit and be kept in order.
There's a luscious apple right on top. To make it drop, you gotta keep on shaking and you might.
Like I've already said, this doesn't have a 3mm 78 needle, only a needle for LPs. And somewhere I have some micro groove 78s, but I can't seem to lay my hands on them, and I'm not in the mood to dig through every 78 I have to try to locate them. So that was just a regular 78, and as you can tell, it plays. Now, of course, if you wanted to play regular 78s properly, you would have to change the needle out to a 3mm needle, but then you wouldn't be able to play LPs or 45s. So probably just best to reserve this one for micro groove records and use something else for 78s. Alright, if you want this thing, there's a link in the description where you can bid on it, but I'm going to have to get a good price for this, or it's just going to have to stay here.